Hello viewers, and welcome to Low Fidelity Commander, or in this case, Low Fidelity Brawl. I am Little Beep, and I just finished another league with my current favorite deck in the Brawl format, Huatli Radiant Champion. Right now, the Brawl metagame seems like it's split into two categories of decks. This is of course not completely true, it's more complex than this, but roughly you've got very aggressive Kari Zev based red decks, seem to be maybe 30 to 40% of the metagame, and all the decks that are trying in some way or another to beat the Kari Zev decks, which tend to be bigger mid-range decks with a focus on one-for-one removal and life gain. Huatli is an attempt to sort of take a third path. We are a deck that can go a little bit bigger than Kari Zev, but we are running as our commander something that lets us kind of slip under a lot of the more controlling decks and beat them by going way over the top of them in the late game. So Huatli, as a commander, has an emblem that in this deck you can usually hit the turn after casting her if you time her correctly, or maybe 2 turns after casting her if you get her out early. The goal of this deck is to basically cast a Huatli as soon as possible if you're up against something with counterspells, or to cast her once you've got a bit of a board presence if you're up against something without counterspells, to emblem her, and then to basically just draw your entire deck and win. Once you have a Huatli emblem going, the average card in your deck draws you something like a card, maybe even a card and a slight fraction of a card. We have a lot of cards that can make 3 creatures at a time, 2 creatures at a time. So basically once you get Huatli out, your cards are drawing you cards, which draw you more cards, and you tend to win very, very quickly. In the league that I'm about to show off, we don't actually have any crazy emblem games, so I might even show a couple of extra games just to get those in, but the nice thing about this league we just played is we actually 5-0'd without even having to go crazy with a Huatli emblem. That's because her secondary ability to pump a creature by the number of creatures you have is really good with a few cards in the deck. Specifically, we tend to do a lot of pumping of Heart of Kirin, just a cheap lifelinker that can attack and block, tends to be getting in for 10. Same deal with Aerial Responder, kind of an important card in the deck, so it offers a bit of life boost against Kari Zev. If you can gain 6 or 7 life a couple of times, they usually have a very hard time winning. And then finally, I'd like to call out also Cultivator of Blades, a card which is really innocuous. You might remember being like an okay rare in Kaladesh Draft, but credit to Saffron Olive of MTG Goldfish for turning me on to this combo. Cultivator of Blades, when she attacks, pumps all your other creatures by the amount of her power, which means that if you Huatli her first, you're essentially giving your entire team an overrun for like 6 or 7. And so if you cast Cultivator Blades, people have to kill it immediately, or they just die. And it leaves a couple servos behind, even if they do that. So this deck's been really good for me so far, hitting like an 80% win rate roughly, maybe 70 to 75% if you don't count a couple of kind of poorly built rogue decks we've run into. And it's just a blast. When you're going off with it, it feels amazing. The only decks that I've really worried about are Kari Zev when they draw Goblin Chainwhirler specifically. That card, of course, is kind of a beating, just as it is for this sort of deck in Standard. And Nicol Bolas has also been a little bit rough, just because they can run River's Rebuke and Hour of Devastation and Yeheni's Expertise, and a lot of sweepers are not something you want to see. Sometimes you can survive 1, but 2 is really difficult. The nice thing is once you have a Huatli emblem, as long as you're not going too crazy with how you play your cards, it's pretty much impossible to lose even against sweepers, because the emblem can't be removed and you're just outdrawing your opponent to a ridiculous extent. But without further ado, I suppose we should move to the games here. I will make a note if I see any cards pop up during the game that games that I'm thinking of cutting or replacing with other cards. But let's just see the deck in action. So I just came off of a league, went 5-0 pretty easily against a bunch of different tier decks, and let's see how things went. So first we were matched against Kallio, who I believe was on Kari Zev. So we get to be on the play, always helpful. Certainly Kari Zev on the play against you can be rough, even if they don't have Chainwhirler sometimes. I still think the matchup is probably slightly in Huatli's favor, but that may change as the meta shifts and people's Kari Zev decks get more vicious and efficient. Is Magic Online going to even let us have this replay here? I am curious about that. Let's give this one more shot here. Oh, I see what's happening. I'm clicking the S button, and that's not how this is supposed to go. Let's give it another shot here. Alright, so we wound up mulliganing an opener that had 6 lands and 1 spell, which isn't going to really do, and we kept a pretty good hand here where we need to hit some lands. We scryed into one on top, which is great. And so our plan here is to curve it with Shanna, and once in a while you can just try to be the aggressive player against mono red. Shanna tends to enable those kinds of draws, very good in the deck. I can even see the deck moving to being a Shanna deck if it turns out that Karizev is too good and we need to take a more aggressive tack. Anyway, our opponent has a pretty typical turn 2 Karizev draw. And we just go ahead and slam Servo Exhibition and start getting in with our Hexproof Watchwolf, as it were. Hoping they don't just kill her immediately, and of course if they had casted Goblin Chainwhirler that turn, we almost would have had to scoop on the spot because that would have wiped our board, but all they have is a Bomat Courier. Card's not great against us, so notably we choose not to block the Bomat Courier here. We are not concerned about them drawing a bunch of cards anytime soon, and our servos are very valuable. They're 1/1s, they also pump Shanna, they are also going to make Huatli much better when she comes down, so we're happy just taking this hit for now. So now it's our turn, and oh man, we hit Legion's Landing, so that's a very good draw. Had we not hit Legion's Landing, our play here would likely have just been Huatli pump to 7 loyalty with her plus ability, attack for 5, and then the mono red deck has to choose between trying to attack a planeswalker that's gaining 4 to 5 loyalty per turn, or trying to attack me and risking Huatli embleming or pumping Shanna to an enormous quantity of power. We also could have played Shalai. I would have had to think about it a little bit more, but because we have Legion's Landing now, the choice is pretty clear. We're just going to go ahead and flip Legion's Landing and then post-combat go ahead and play out Shalai. So we could have played Huatli or Shalai here. At this point, I'm a little nervous about the opponent burning out... Actually, I'm not really nervous about the opponent burning out Shanna. What I'm a little bit nervous about is still, at this point, they've missed a land drop. We have had an incredible start, and we need to figure out how we could possibly lose the game. One way to lose the game would be our opponent just playing a third mountain and playing Goblin Chainwhirler, and then getting to attack Huatli down and wiping our entire board in the process. Right now, we are just going to play Shalai to prevent that from leaving our board empty. Chainwhirler would, of course, still be good, but we get to keep Shanna around. And now they can't target anything else with burn spells in case that was their goal. They go ahead and attack anyway. I am willing to block the Bomat Courier here with Shalai, just because if they're killing Shalai, it means they're not killing any of my other stuff, unless they run Sweltering Suns. Who knows? I don't think so. And then if they do spend their turn killing Shalai, at that point, we actually just cast Huatli and attack for lethal. So we're going to see what they try to do here. And they have a Hungry Flames to kill Shalai. Hilariously, because we have Hexproof, they have to hit themselves with the damage. But even if they hadn't been forced to do that, we were still attacking for 11 this turn with Huatli alone. And yep, so Huatli here is just basically Lava Axe. We attack with an 8/8 Shanna and kill the opponent on turn 5. And while they did miss a land drop, still, I think even a pretty good draw of theirs would have been hard-pressed to contend, especially if we had just cast Angel of Sanctions before Huatli here. So, next game here, up against Gargamel, running Nissa Steward of Elements, a deck that I was really interested in back in the 30-life format. I think in 20-life it seems rough to be playing as your commander something that can't protect itself. I mean, Huatli falls into that category, but because we're a swarm deck and Huatli encourages that, it still seems fine to be playing Huatli, especially since Huatli kind of wins the game by herself in a way that Nissa doesn't quite do. Even so, blue and green are good colors in this format, just as they are in every other format. And here we are going to be on the draw. So our hand is fine here. Steward of Solidarity is a card that I've considered cutting. It's a little slow, honestly. Being a 2/2 for 2 is not super great. And if you're really lucky and it just kind of lives and you get to just sort of play out your game, it might make 2 tokens over the course of a normal game. If we had like a Raise the Alarm in this format, I would definitely be playing a Raise the Alarm over Steward of Solidarity. But for now, because we only have a couple of ways to produce tokens for 2 mana, we're running Steward as another 2-drop. I could see this being better even as something like Glorybound Initiate, just something to give us an extra buffer against red and maybe provide a little bit of extra early pressure. But it's fine. It's not a bad card by any means. So we go ahead and play out Steward. Opponent gets a Prowling Serpent Bar down. We just stopped to rest it. We had the option that last turn to cast Heart of Kirin or Song of Freyalise into Heart of Kirin. I'd rather cast Song of Freyalise when it might have a little bit more impact, like when I can make sure that I'm going to have a lot of creatures on the board when it makes counters for everything. And even though Prowling Serpentard isn't super scary, it's not like running counter spells, it's still big. And we do want to make sure we don't just get run over by a bunch of big creatures early. So we just go ahead and use our removal while we have the chance. And we're going to start tapping Steward to make tokens so that Huatli gets better when she comes out. Opponent has a Bristling Hydra, so not a bad curve. We can attack into that one. So this is the turn where, because we can't cast Jade Light Ranger, I am going to go ahead and just cast Song of Freyalise. I want to make sure that next turn we can definitely get down basically our entire hand as needed, depending on what our opponent does. So we're just going to cast Heart of Kirin here. Now we have access to 7 mana next turn. Not 8, it'd be great if it was 8 so we could cast everything, but we'll see kind of what the next turn brings. Opponent just has a roughness. Cracks in with Hydra. Heart of Kirin, even when you're not attacking with it using Huatli, is still a great blocker. It's just a fantastic card. Any Planeswalker commander deck, besides maybe Nicol Bolas, should definitely be running it. I didn't have it in the first draft, and that was a bad mistake. So now we have 7 mana, and we have the choice of whether to cast Huatli or Cultivator Blades, but not that much of a choice, because Cultivator Blades, once we make servos, is just threatening to kill our opponent with Huatli. They need to kill the Cultivator Blades next turn. Good luck with that with a blue-green deck. Or we're just going to attack for like 36 damage, 37, 42, some crazy number here. Oh, maybe even more with Song of Freyalise. So they cycle the Hieroglyphic Illumination, digging for an answer, cast their commander, and so I think I'm going to win right on the spot here. But it was not to be. They had a Ixalan Draftchaff Pounce to take out Cultivator Blades. Roughness is very good at fighting, of course. And here they could choose to attack. I'm a little surprised they didn't attack with Roughness. I think that was probably a mistake. We might have been able to just block the Bristling Hydra with Heart of Kirin, which would have been fine. And I suppose if they attack with Bristling Hydra, then Roughness isn't turned on anymore. We get to kill Nissa. If they had attacked with just Roughness, though, it's not like we can attack through Bristling Hydra. Maybe they're just trying to keep their life total a little bit higher when the Song of Freyalise goes off. I'm not sure. In any case, Steward has now made 2 tokens, so it's been pretty good this game, being cast on turn 2 against a deck that didn't disrupt it. We're going to go ahead and crew the Heart before the Song of Freyalise triggers, just to make sure it gets a little bit bigger, because we might be trying to attack our opponent to death with this Heart of Kirin. The ground is pretty clogged up. So Heart gets big. Rather than cast Huatli, Huatli could certainly get to a very high loyalty on this board, but our opponent can attack her back very quickly with Bristling Hydra and Roughness. So I prefer just to make sure Huatli is as high impact as possible, plus I need to make sure I'm actually getting spells into my hand here. If we have 2 more lands on top of our deck, Huatli might not be enough. Especially if our opponent has something like River's Rebuke. River's Rebuke would be really brutal if we just cast Huatli and then got her killed immediately to a River's Rebuke. And our opponent did keep 1 card on top with Nissa, so I'm keeping in mind what that could be. So this turn we're just going to cast Jade Light Ranger, kill their commander, and now we're just playing kind of a normal green-white mid-range game, trying to go a bit bigger than our opponent. Opponent has Prey Upon to kill the Steward of Solidarity, which I suppose makes sense. They want to stop the flow of tokens. And this turn they get a bit of an impatient attack with Bristling Hydra. I'm happy to trade Jade Light Ranger for that. And now they need to keep playing big creatures to get Roughness turned on. And they have Nissa Vital Force, which does provide a big creature. But because Heart of Kirin is a busted magic card, we're just going to be able to slam Huatli, attack with our Crew the Heart with Huatli, attack with our 2 mana Serra Angel, and kill the Nissa, which means that their land turns back into a land next turn. They don't have Roughness active anymore, and they have to find some way to turn on Roughness if they even want to attack Huatli at all. As it turns out, they don't have that. All they have is Nissa Scry again. And we're just going to keep killing Nissa, and now we've drawn a Johnny Unyielding, so that's where the game is going to draw to a close very quickly. Hello, dear, recording. That was my lovely wife, Tammy. Just came home from the gym. I'm here being healthy in my own way, mentally healthy, by playing this challenging children's card game. So yeah, now with the Johnny going, of course, there's no possible way you could ever lose this. We're just going to, make a Anthem on legs that is Angel of Invention, and this game is completely over at this point. In fact, we just win with a Heart of Kirin attack. And that's that. So opponent played a reasonable mid-range game, but we were able to just go a little bit bigger. Heart of Kirin, of course, the MVP, killing multiple Planeswalkers, but Huatli just making large creatures really helps you in managing walkers and threatening the opponent to make sure they don't have a chance to turn the corner. Round 3, we are up against Sheer, somebody with the username calculated to just make me miserable here. Sheer is running Galta, a card that can be kind of threatening for this deck. If they have kind of a quick curve and get the turn 4, turn 5 Galta, sometimes that's enough to actually overwhelm us before we can get defenses up, because our kind of swarm of weenies does not do much against a 12-12 Trampler. But fortunately, we're on the play here. We have a couple of mana dorks. Hand's going to come out pretty fast. Not having white sources is a little awkward. That's something that I'm thinking of changing about the deck. The fact that we have so many double white spells in a format where the mana bases are quite awful does not feel great. It's also possible that I should be switching like a Druid of the Cowl to a whatever the dinosaur mana dork is, the 2 mana 1/1 that makes any color, just to increase the number of white sources a little bit. So opponent just has a Resilient Kenra. The Grizzly Bear is not too scary. We're going to go ahead and pass the turn. Opponent has a Jade Light Ranger, which throws a Heroic Intervention at the yard. It's good to know they can't have that particular Shroud effect anymore. And they choose not to attack. I think they're just trying to get out Galta here. It's interesting. I guess, don't know what kind of trick they were thinking of. We might have tried block with Spore Swarm. I'm not completely certain. Given they have 6 cards in hand, probably not actually, since we're just trying to make Huatli do great things here. And here we get Growing Rites of Itlamok, which our plan this turn was probably just to cast Steward plus Heart of Kirin. But Growing Rites of Itlamok gives us so much mana that it seems worth it to try this risk, just because there are a few cards we could get here that would be completely nuts with Growing Rites. And hey, Rishkar is not bad. So now we get to add to our board very quickly. Make Heart of Kirin over Steward of Solidarity, just because they're going to get Galta soon, and I want to start attacking them for damage with this Heart of Kirin. And now next turn we're just going to have casual 10 mana. Opponent has a Steel Leaf Champion, and a Prey Upon to kill the Initiate, turning off our white mana. We do draw some more white mana, which is really nice. That was a little fortunate to get there, but of course we have seen quite a bit of our deck at this point. So we are going to get to go ahead and just play out Huatli, Crew the Heart to make sure we have a creature when we use our plus ability, cast Rishkar, and this turn, instead of crewing with creatures the Heart, I'm trying to optimize for having more blockers so that we have a better chance of embleming, or of keeping Huatli alive to pump again. It's possible that I should have used the Rishkar to crew and kept Huatli's loyalty a bit higher, but given that all our opponent's creatures can kill her in one hit anyway, I don't think it matters too much. They have a pretty solid turn there, Nature's Way taking out the Rishkar. And here's where they attack Huatli. Very nice. Of course, because we have Itlamok open, we can recast her as many times as we want to. And here's the turn where we have to decide whether they have like a Naturalize effect or not. I think it would pretty much have to be Naturalize or like Pierce the Sky. Not sure what else would punish us here. But, and we can't say for sure they aren't bluffing, because they could have played Galta, but they would have been dead on board, so they were sort of forced into this play, which doesn't make it more likely that they have a removal spell. In fact, it probably makes it you kind of can't learn anything from that. So they had to not play Galta or they would have been dead, and so they would have to have, I think, one of 2 specific cards. I don't even think these decks play Pierce the Sky. Don't even know if they play Naturalize, frankly. Maybe Dissenter's Deliverance. In any case, we have the win on board. We don't want to be facing down a Galta next turn, so we, at some point, do kind of have to go for it. So we're going to go ahead, cast Regal Caracal, use the Itlamok to hash up Oasis, the Heart of Kirin. Just to hedge against a potential removal spell, we do play a Regal Caracal instead of Huatli this turn, because it makes it much easier for us to threaten lethal with a Swarm. And yep, Heart of Kirin does the trick, turn 6. You get in for a lot of damage really fast with Huatli sometimes against these Galta decks. You really have to kind of play the aggro game against them a bit more. Then we have our last 2 matches. I believe against Karizev and Gideon here. So in the 3-0 bracket, we face Gideon the Trials, a deck that I assume is very good against Karizev, but is kind of really, really bad against us, particularly the more aggressive version. Once in a while, they might be able to get you with like a Fumigate if they're playing a controlling version, but our opponent seems to be playing a lot of aggro creatures. So we're on the play again. We get a Llanowar Elves. Awkwardly, we sort of have to cast this Renegade Rallier as a 3-2, because it's going to be a long time before we get any value out of it, but whatever. 3-2 in turn 2 is not the worst. We're at least developing our board, trying to get Huatli out early. They have Glory-Bound Initiative, which is very good at attacking Huatli, unfortunately, but we don't really have a better play this turn. We could cast Area Responder, but next turn we can just cast Area Responder and Heart of Kirin. So I'm pretty happy just to cast Huatli, plus her, and make sure that she at least survives till the next turn. We'll happily trade Rallier for Glory-Bound Initiate, because we'd rather just keep Huatli's loyalty higher. Opponent does not take the trade. We're going to go ahead and run out Gideon, hit Huatli, but here Huatli, as you can see, is starting to already kind of gain us virtual life, absorbing damage that we'd be taking otherwise, buying us time to draw some of our really powerful top-end cards. And here we get really lucky. Sram's Expertise is easily one of the best 3 or 4 draws in the deck at this point. I'd been perfectly happy with an Angel of Invention or Regal Caracal, or even a cast out for Gideon, but Sram's Expertise is just excellent. It means we immediately get to threaten a Huatli emblem. So we're going to cast the Expertise, put an Aerial Responder into play, and just pass the turn. Now our opponent's got a tough choice to make. They can either attack Huatli with Gideon and Glory-Bound Initiate, which would at least reduce our creature count, but they're no guarantee of being able to actually stop the emblem, so they're going to go ahead instead and just stop our Aerial Responder from attacking. They really want us not to be able to get in with this flyer, but I think they realize already that because they can't cast out Huatli or something, they're pretty dead. And even if they could cast out Huatli here, we could just recast her, plus her again, and already have her be at 9. So our opponent basically has no way of stopping the emblem from coming down because Sorcerous Spyglass is banned, and so yep, they're just going to play out their spells as best they can, but here we have Huatli emblem. We drew a creature off the top, which is nice. It would have been a little bit awkward if we had a couple of lands and couldn't get any use out of the emblem. At that point, we'd just be using Heart of Kirin to try and stall until we draw creatures, but our deck has a lot of creatures and token makers. So we're going to go ahead and have Fairgrounds Warden, which draws a card, wipes out the Glory-Bound Initiate, and even though we hit another land there, and I'm not sure we have it on top, I think the game is likely to be over at this point. Our opponent needs to somehow deal us 16 damage before we start drawing more creatures, and that's not something it looks like they're going to be able to do. Yeah, they just scoop it up without even waiting to see us draw a Saproling Migration or something like that. And so we're on to the finals. So far, we've maybe been a bit lucky in this league. We've gone first 3 times, been up against a couple of opponents who missed some land drops, got that lucky Sram's Expertise in the last game to wrap things up quickly. But here you're going to see kind of the staying power of the deck, how the deck can perform even under really adverse conditions. So here we are up against Kari Zev, the demon of the format. We have to mulligan. We had one of the hands that can be a little awkward with the deck, where we had a Planeswalker and a Regal Caracal and a Song of Freyalise and no cheap creatures. So once in a while you get these hands that don't really come together, but our 6 is very good. We do have a pretty low curve. We find white mana on top, which is great. So the first thing we need to go right is we would really love to play the Servant of the Conduit and have it survive, so that we can start having free mana, but nope, Shivan Fire, so our opponent gets to be essentially playing first with an extra card thanks to our mulligan and the Kari Zev against an empty board. We're just going to take out Kari Zev right away, and because our opponent let Kari Zev go to the command zone, now we're pretty sure they don't have burn spells, which is really nice. So Fairgrounds Warden doing really good work there, going to also block PNLR. And here, they don't have burn spells, so instead of trying to bait with Rishkar, we're just going to go ahead and play Pride Sovereign, hope it can, if they have a Chandra Torch of Defiance or something here, we are in a lot of trouble, because they could just kill Pride Sovereign, but as it turns out, they don't have anything like that. Their hand seems to be a bit slow. All they can really do is fire off Kari Zev. Notably, they could have something like a Chainwhirler in hand, but we have a draw that doesn't let them get a lot of value from that at least. And ooh, Shanna. Shanna is very good, so now we get to have an excellent turn where we cast Rishkar, get a mana off of Rishkar immediately, cast Shanna off Fairgrounds Warden, and then Shanna's going to be a 6/6 if we get to exert Pride Sovereign. So what could go wrong at this point? Oh, Rampaging Ferocidon could go wrong. Okay, well, we're going to need to use Pride Sovereign now so we're not losing much of a life making these tokens, but yeah, both of the red 3-drops, it turns out, are really good against what Huatli's trying to do. So even if they don't have Chainwhirler, this Ferocidon does make things awkward, though it is nice that they sequenced this poorly and are taking extra damage off Inventor's Apprentice. That's cool. Okay, so here we draw Cultivator of Blades. So even if we had just cast Huatli this turn, casting Huatli and plussing her would put her at 10 loyalty, which is pretty good. Makes our opponent kind of have to make killing Huatli a full-time job, which is great. But instead we draw Cultivator of Blades. Again, just really nice card here. We have a bunch of 5-drops in the deck, and any of them would have been outstanding in this position. Actually, a Johnny would have been outstanding too because we have Rishkar mana. But we get Cultivator, which is plenty solid. We're going to go ahead and play it out, and we have the choice here whether to make servos or put counters on. I had to deliberate about this one. Servos deal us an extra 2 damage off Rampaging Ferocidon. and expose the cultivator to more removal. And if this cultivator lives, they can't kill it, then we are just going to crush this game anyway. So I'm pretty happy just putting on the counters and saying, all right, even if you have Goblin Chainwhirler, I'm going to make sure that we are attacking you for 1,000,000 at some point. And we do get the attack with Shauna here. We're at 18. We're at a very safe life total. It's time to start playing like the aggro deck and attritioning down their board. We don't want to get burned out if we stall for too long. So here's a pretty darn good turn for the opponent. They have a Karizev's Expertise on Shauna. Nice. Throw down a Cartouche on the Ferocidon. Now we're being attacked for a lot of damage. Our Fairgrounds Warden isn't blocking anymore. So a really tricky blocking decision, especially because we had to consider them potentially having a removal spell. What I decided to go for here is that our hand's empty. We are almost certainly just going to be playing Huatli next turn. And so what I want to make sure of is that if they have a burn spell, I'm assuming they, for the sake of just playing this out in my head, I figured, what if they have Lightning Strike? If they have something like a Lightning Strike, I need either Cultivator Blades to survive, in which case we just beat them, or for at least one cat to survive so that we get to start attacking for huge amounts of lifelink damage if we remove the Ferocidon. And so I want to line up blocks so that we give them the choice to either lose Ferocidon or kill Cultivator, and where we are able to then either threaten attack with the cat or attack with Cultivator, either of which should help us clean the game up here. It's possible that, given that I'm at 18 and not really in any danger of dying, I should maybe have just left back the Cultivator so that it dies to fewer things, like they could have built to smash or invigorated a rampage or something like that, but I figure that even if Cultivator dies, if it takes their last spell in their hand to do that, and I get to start to keep making cats with Pride Sovereign and attacking with huge lifelinkers, I'll probably be okay anyway. So we line up this block, keeping one cat, making sure we're trying to kill the Ferocidon. Opponent does in fact have Invigorated Rampage, okay, so we're taking a bunch of damage here, especially off our own Shauna. So we could have chumped the Shauna with a cat, but again, this cat's going to gain us back enough life that it doesn't really matter whether we chump here. It's kind of life neutral either way, and we'd rather just have the token alive, of course, to keep Shauna big. So now we're at 5, which is a bit dangerous, but we've wiped out our opponent's entire board because this deck goes really big. And now we just get to go ahead and do what we were planning to do along, play Huatli. Exert Pride Sovereign. This card is really good. In a 1-of format where there's not a lot of efficient removal and sometimes your 3-drop just lives, this card is really good. And now we have a 7/7 cat that's attacking our opponent alongside Shauna. So we could have attacked with Fairgrounds Warden here as well, but we're at 5. We're trying to keep things a little conservative here. Or we're going to 12. Even so, I don't think the extra damage from Fairgrounds Warden is likely to matter, and I'm just trying to play around random, enormous damage swings doing something, but I won't claim that I'm playing optimally in this singleton format where I'm not sure what's in my opponent's deck. In any case, they do have Goblin Chainwhirler, which is pretty good, so we're going to lose all these lifelink cats that we really need to gain us life. Huatli takes a hit, we go to 11, we get attacked. We block the monkey, go to 10. Okay, so keep in mind our opponent has cast both Rampaging Ferocidon and Goblin Chainwhirler this game out of the top 15 cards of their deck. And now we've arrived at a position where we're still actually winning pretty well. At this point, what I'm thinking is how much burn could our opponent possibly draw in the next turn? What is the way they could deal us like max damage here? The card I'm thinking of is Inferno Jet, the 6 damage lava axe that cycles. I think some of these decks play that card, and 6 damage is kind of a lot out of nowhere, so I have to kind of treat our life total like we're at 4 for the purposes of this exercise. Here I have 2 options. I could either cast a Johnny Unyielding, remove the Chainwhirler. Our opponent gains 3 life, and I attack them for 5 with Fairgrounds Warden and Shauna. So that way I am at 10. I have an Ajani at 2 loyalty, Chainwhirler's gone. But if they draw something like a Glorybringer, it's possible they could kill Ajani, kill one of our creatures, make sure they don't die on the backswing, and then, if I draw lands and they draw spells, things could get ugly. What I want to do is keep Ajani Unyielding in my hand, just in case they have some big creature that I need to get rid of. Also, this helps them have hard decisions to make. They don't know what's in our hand. Either way, we get to kill the Chainwhirler, because Huatli leads to a forced block. So we're going to pump the Fairgrounds Warden, get in. They have to block Warden or they die. Chainwhirler down. And now we still do leave ourselves dead to Inferno Jet with this play. It's possible that I wasn't supposed to attack with Shauna there. Yeah, I won't claim that I'm playing super tight, but because Huatli puts just so much stuff onto the battlefield, you don't necessarily need to play the tightest here. So they have 4 damage off Karizev. If they had drawn Inferno Jet, I guess we were dead there, but they didn't, and so they're facing 3 lethal attackers next turn. And that does it. Okay, so that was a 5-0 lead with Huatli. Making swarms is pretty good. There are not a ton of sweepers in this format. A lot of the decks are just trying to sort of race past each other, and if what you can do involves making a giant Huatli emblem, then you're going to be in pretty good shape here. So, just for a bonus, let's see if I can find one more game here that features a Huatli emblem in use. So here we have a league with Vraska. Let me run back to a league where Huatli was played here. I think this would have been it. Alright, I think this game may have been a Huatli emblem game. Let me take a quick look at it. Okay, this is against SRAM. Probably not going to show that one just because it's not a tier deck. Let me see if I can find a tier deck running into a Huatli emblem here. I think there was a very good Scarab God game we played at one point. Ooh, the Locust God. Alright, so we'll go ahead and do this. Locust God's a pretty solid deck. Blue-red controls a fine build here. So we choose to play out white mana first, just in case we want to cast Adorned Pouncer, but because our draws mean that we just want to play Shalai on turn 3, we're just going to play Llanowar Elves here. Opponent has Search for Escanta, not a bad card. We just, instead of going for Shalai here, we decided to go for an early Huatli. We really, in this kind of matchup, the only way they can really beat a Huatli emblem is to counter Huatli before she even comes down. They're not going to be able to burn her to death. She has too much loyalty. Bounce spells only delay the problem. And then something like Disallow could work, but forces them to be holding up mana at all times and never counter anything. So having an early Huatli here matters a little bit more than the damage from Shalai. It's also possible the best card against our entire deck that the Locust God runs is Hour of Devastation, which can kill a low loyalty Huatli and wipe your board. So just having a Huatli down early with high loyalty is just so good. We go ahead and just play Shalai here. We are bottlenecked on white mana, so we're just playing the best spell we can each turn. Opponent decided not to use a Countervailing Winds there because they only had one card in the graveyard. We had the extra mana from Llanowar Elves. By the way, we didn't attack with Llanowar Elves there just in case they had something like Merfolk Trickster. The 1 damage is not going to matter, and people could be playing just about anything in this format. So here they go. At 4 mana, they seem very likely to have a counter up. So I am trying to decide whether to risk ultimating Huatli. If they have a Disallow, then they do sort of undo the last couple of turns of work we did. And what I decided to go for is I want to keep Huatli a bit safe. I'm just going to plus her one more time so that Disallow doesn't kill her if we try to ultimate. And as it turns out, I get semi-punished by something else. They have they have a commit here. So our Huatli was hexproof, so they can't commit the Huatli, but they do get rid of Shalai, meaning they could do something nasty on the next turn. But keep in mind also what we're doing right now is threatening to next turn. If we draw a land, we can just cast a Kick Saproling Migration and attack for something like 14 damage with an Adorned Pouncer, so that's something else our opponent has to keep an eye on at the moment. They go for a Pull from Tomorrow, and this is the point where, yep, you don't actually have any time to be drawing cards here, because now we get to Ultimate Huatli, and now you just get to see what the emblem is like. It's not as though this is a game where we needed the emblem to save us or anything like that, but this is the point where even if they do find a sweeper off that Pull from Tomorrow, even if they find 2 consecutive sweepers, it's really not going to matter. So we have Spore Swarm, make 3 tokens, draw 3 cards. Steward of Solidarity, draw another card. Now they have to deal with at least Adorned Pouncer next turn or they just die. They find a Gilded Lotus. And in theory they could disallow a Huatli activation on the Adorned Pouncer. So we're just going to keep developing our board, having some fun here. And yeah, they scoop to Shalai. Ain't no way they're going to beat that because now all of our creatures are going to have hexproof. They can't kill the Adorned Pouncer if we try to pump it with Huatli. They could have a Disallow, but we get to at least Thopter the Gilded Lotus at worst this turn, and yeah. So just note that in our hand right now we have the capability to draw 7 cards by just playing our normal spells. Huatli's Emblem is excellent, and man, there are other crazy games I wish I could show off here, but unfortunately I have a pretty poor memory for which those are, so for now I'll just stop the recording. Thanks for your patience through this, and I hope you give the Huatli deck a try. It's really quite strong. I have been genuinely impressed with it, and I think that until the meta shifts to contain more sweepers, it is definitely what I would take into a Brawl challenge if I were going to play one of those. Alright, let me know any feedback on the video, and thanks again for watching.